Many people question where would Davius Richard end up, and that was before the injury. But now we have our answer. Richard is headed to the UFL and signing with the Houston Roughnecks. Oh yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And though the sports may not be sporting the way that you want them to, FanDuel is making up for that this summer by giving every single customer, new and old, a daily boost or bonus all summer long. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. We wrap up today's episode with a look at the very low expectations surrounding Hampton and North Carolina A&T in the CAA, but there is one player who stands out amongst the rest. Prior to that, we'll look at the Gerald Huggins top 10 that we previewed, that we revealed on Thursday and Friday's episode. Phenomenal pair of episodes that we put out, in my opinion. And we kick off today's Locked On HBCU with a look at Davius Richard. It broke late last week that Richard was signing with the UFL's Houston Roughnecks. This was an ongoing storyline. This was something that I think a lot of people had kind of put in the back of their mind, but they were still anticipating what would happen. Would Richard sign with an NFL team? Would Richard sign with a UFL team? Which is what he ended up doing. And I'll say this. I do think that it's a bit bittersweet to a certain degree. I want to definitely celebrate his accomplishment, but I can't help but concern myself with the injury. I can't help but think about what would have happened if this injury never occurred, and it is frustrating because the injury was so avoidable. But let's move past that and just look at the injury itself. The worst part about the injury is that it takes away any certainty, because to me, Richard was one of, if not the most intriguing and interesting prospects in the draft this year from an HBCU football standpoint. Because if you take Richard and his career and take him from being a quarterback to being any other position, I really do think that this man gets drafted. I genuinely do believe that, because he is a legend who has accomplished great things. He has cemented himself in the North Carolina Central record book, right? Because he's a quarterback, you're looking at a player who played quarterback at a small college. That's a very big hurdle. I know there are small college quarterbacks who get drafted. Don't get me wrong. I know that. But being a small college quarterback is not an easy hurdle to get over. When he got injured, that pretty much guaranteed that he wouldn't get drafted. If I had to guess what I think would happen with health, I believe that he would have ended up being an undrafted free agent. Not a camp invite, but I think he would have been an undrafted free agent where he would have got a good amount of guaranteed money. He would have been on a roster during training camp. He would have had the ability to showcase his talents during the preseason. That's what I think would have happened. But I've seen myself be wrong about HBCU draftees before, thinking, oh, Marquise Bell got to get drafted. I was confident about Bell, right? Like these are things that I can't erase out of my mind. So I can't be fully certain. I can feel a little bit of confidence, but I can't be fully certain with what would have happened. I hate that the injury took that away, because now we will never know. We can believe what would have happened, but we'll never know for certain. And unless you have inside information. I don't have inside information. And I don't know if those teams are saying, hey, if you weren't drafted or if you weren't injured, we would draft you. I don't know if they're coming and saying that. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who stop playing football in college. There's a lot of people who are never able to play on any professional level. I don't care if it's the NFL, the UFL, the CFL. Davius Richard is playing professional football. So with that being the case, it's a completely different ballpark. So you have to appreciate, you have to celebrate what he was able to do. The timing of the injury was definitely what took him out of the running for being drafted. But his agent did come out and speak about, like, first, okay, let me say this before I get into it, because his agent did say something I thought was important. As I'm speaking about this being a bittersweet moment, I fully believe that this was the correct decision for Davius Richard if his health has the timeline that I believe his health to have. Okay. Now, this is what Richard's agent said. She said that some teams in the AFC Northeastern region, so not the AFC North or the AFC East, but the AFC Northeastern region, inquired about Richard's services, right? He is willing, this is a quote now, Richard is willing to accept the role. However, we've got to give him an opportunity to be a quarterback. We've told him because of the injury, don't think delay is denial. I think that's very important. I wish that I could see Davius Richard in the NFL in 2024, but him signing with the Houston Roughnecks tells you that at the best, it won't happen until 2025. That's bittersweet, but it's also more sweet than bitter because it's giving him the best opportunity to make it to the NFL with some sort of cachet, not just somebody you can easily disregard. See, if he wasn't going to be healthy until late in the summer, then he's going to get into training camp behind. He's going to have a longer road than he would have had he entered in May or in May. Like that's a different ball game. The reason going to the UFL is the best choice for him is because health-wise, he wouldn't have been ready in enough time to make a serious push for a roster in 2024. Maybe if they believed in his talent, he could have been a practice squad guy, but he'll be healthy enough to play in the UFL in 2025. So when that happens, he'll be able to go and showcase his talents. And to me, this is like a professional proof of concept. In business, you want to prove that this idea could work, right? Proof of concept. That's what this is with the UFL. Let me go show you what I can do in this professional league and then come in with a much greater level of cachet than I would have had if I would have came in as a UDFA, if I would have came in as an injured UDFA. Go and play, show that you're healthy, show that you can still be who you are. And I think that's going to end up being the best thing for Davius Richard moving forward. Speaking of moving forward, that's exactly what we're going to do with this episode. And we're going to move forward to Gerald Huggins' top 10. We did this on Thursday and Friday of last week's slate of shows, and I think it was phenomenal. I really do. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely great. And I want to recap some of my biggest takeaways from the list as we continue with Locked On HBCU. It's summertime and maybe you want to plan a beachfront vacation. Maybe you want to go out to the sun, but you want to do it carefully. So you're getting yourself sunglasses, sunscreen, hats, swim shorts, doing the whole nine, right? So let's say you're doing that and you're like, these prices are starting to add up. That's okay, because with iBody, you're going to get money back and not some of those pennies on the dollar. iBody is going to give you the good money because, listen here, this is my thing about iBody, it's a free app that allows you to earn cash back every time that you shop. Earn hundreds, right? Because the average person earns $256 per year with Ibotta. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip or something like that, right? So you can go to Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy. It's over 2,400 retailers that accept Ibotta. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying it, using the code Locked On College when you register. Go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app, start earning cash back and use the code Locked On College. That is IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store. Use the code Locked On College. Today's episode is also brought to you by Factor. Now, here's my thing. I'm trying to eat better and I'm not doing too well about it. One of those things that could genuinely help me is Factors, because Factors meals allows you to get chef crafted meals that you can warm up in only 2 minutes. Now, no matter how busy you are, you can get 2 minutes of free time to be able to get yourself lunch. So, doesn't matter what kind of options you want, maybe calorie smart, maybe protein plus, maybe keto. All of that is there. Factors fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So, no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy a nutritious, great tasting meal. There's 35 different meals with 60 add-ons to choose from, which means you can always switch it up. None of that feeling redundant and getting tired of eating the same thing over and over. That's not the case with Factor Meals. So head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50. Use the code lockedoncollege50 and get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box, or excuse me, your next month. That code is lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports today. It's the first of its kind, 24/7, all day, every day, live sports network on YouTube. Go ahead and type in Locked On Sports today right now and subscribe. Now, Gerald Huggins joined the show, and this was genuinely one of the best episodes that I feel like we've ever done. And y'all know I love having G on the show. I genuinely believe that this is a hard one to top. And sure, maybe this is recency bias. I'll start today. I think this is going to be a difficult one for Gerald and I to top moving forward. I do expect us to continue working together. Of course, he's great. And what he did with this list and my ability to watch the list transpire through the multiple editions of the list probably makes me a little bit biased. But to me, this was one of, if not our best episode, right? I wanted to give a couple of recaps. Let's flash the list for those who maybe didn't see it. This is just the list itself. But if you want to hear the breakdown, you do need to go back to Thursday and Friday's episode. Thank you for everybody who came into the chat, everybody who showed up for the live stream. But here goes 10 through 6. So we're just going to do a quick little rundown, just run down the list and say the names as opposed to any sort of a breakdown. You had 2 Alabama A&M players up top, Carson Vinson at 10 and then Jacoby Hewitt at 9. Then you had a pair of Howard teammates with Kenny Gallup and Carson Hinton at 8 and 7. James Burgess comes in as the sole non-teammate on this side of the list at number 6 out of Alabama State, defensive back. At 5, you had Eric Hunter, linebacker out of Morgan State. You had number 4, Kendall Bowler out of FAMU, another defensive back. Karan Prunty out of North Carolina A&T, another defensive back. Elijah Williams out of Morgan State, a defensive lineman. And then number 1, you had Robert McDaniel, the new Jackson State transfer, another defensive back. So that's a little bit of that's just the list with no breakdown. But my biggest takeaway is look at the amount of defensive backs on this list. That's my biggest takeaway from this whole thing is if you look at the amount of defensive backs that is on this list, it tells you that that's the strength of HBCU football. Of everything that I got from Gerald's list, and Gerald had a phenomenal list with phenomenal breakdowns that if you haven't listened to, please go back to last Thursday and Friday's episode, our top 10 part 1 and part 2. That was my biggest takeaway. Oh, this is the best position group in HBCU football because you look at all of the top tier talent here. Of the top 10, you may not have paid attention, but 6 of those guys were defensive backs. And my favorite part about it is that it's not just isolated. MEAC, SWAC, CAA. You got safeties, you got nickels, you got outside corners. How do you want it? How do you feel? Anything you want, they have it for you. Gallup, Hinton, Burgess, 8, 7, 6. Prunty, Bowler, Prunty, McDaniel, 3, 4, 4, 3, 1, right? Like when you're looking at this list is just so tight. This list is so tight, but it's so many defensive backs. Like Prunty and Bowler were tied with the same score. But yeah, this is the overall opinion of it, is that it's going to be very difficult to see big time passing numbers in 2024 because, and I actually just thought about this too. The running backs, I believe, make up a lot of the offensive skill positions outside of the top 10. It was only one wide receiver in the top 10, and that was Jacoby Hewitt. But I believe that there's about 3 to 4 running backs in that next 10, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But what's interesting is I don't think you're going to see a lot of big passing numbers because you're looking at elite level HBCU talent, right? Because you got one at Jackson State, one at FAMU, one at A&T, one at Bama State, two at Howard. This is spread out. It's not as if one school has all the talent. And with Burgess in Alabama State, one thing that Huggins did say specifically was that, hey, they got another one. I just don't put transfers on the list. The exception is McDaniel because he went from Alcorn to Jackson State, so not really the same thing. But yeah, it's going to be very difficult to pass, and there's questions about the quarterback. If I did my math right, and I look at this list, you have a bunch of high-level defensive backs in your top 10, and I have question marks about quarterbacks all around HBCU football. That sounds like my equation is going to come out to not a lot of good passing, but there are good running backs, and there's not a lot of front seven guys in this mix in the top 10. So maybe you have a strength versus a weakness on both sides. Hey, as an offense, I'm going to try to run the ball because you may be weaker there than if I had passed the ball. Just a little bit of something to look at. But overall, it's still 8 defensive players. It's 6 defensive backs, 8 defensive players if you add in the Williams and Hunter duo at Morgan State. So this is going to be a really fun year, but that's one of the things that I took from it. The other part was, and this is kind of cheating to a degree because I've seen more of the list and I've talked to Gerald. He said, hey, man, after that 10, it's a lot of Alabama A&M. He said, I got some Alabama A&M on the list. He didn't say it's a lot, but he said, I got some Alabama A&M on the list. In translation, there's some good talent out there at Alabama A&M. So now they need the quarterback to step up, whether that's Langford, whether that's the transfer, whoever it may be. They need that person to step up, point blank, period. And I don't know what it changes because you look at a team like Norfolk State. Norfolk State got the most all-conference players in the preseason all-MEAC team. They got the first team all-MEAC quarterback, Otto Coombs. They still predicted to end 5th. So it's not like having a bunch of high-level talent and the quarterback is just all of a sudden just a guarantee that you're going to make it. But at the same time, it does help. So I would love to see what Alabama A&M, and that's something we did mention on the show. If you're looking at Vincent, you're looking at Howard, both of them are very dependent on the quarterback doing what they need to do. Very dependent on it. We don't really think about that enough. Offensive lineman dependent on the quarterback. Hey, if I'm pushing this guy, if I'm having this guy run the arc and you drop deeper than you need to be, now it's going to look like I messed up, but you shouldn't have been there. I was running him around you, but you dropped deeper than you were supposed to. You know, like that. I think that we don't look at the whole offensive lineman depending on the quarterback as much as we should. But in general, Alabama A&M will probably need some really good offensive line help in 2024, or excuse me, some good quarterback help in 2024. Now, as we wrap up today's episode, we're going to push forward and we're going to look at the CAA expectations for Norfolk or for North Carolina A&T and Hampton as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and I understand that sports may not be sporting the way that you would like them to. I understand that sports may not be in the sports that you like may not be in action at the current moment. If you're a football head, don't worry about it. It's right around the corner. If you're a basketball head, you might have a little bit more time, but you could put some money down on the Olympics. And as you're doing that, you'll still, by the way, flag football is coming to the Olympics in 2024. Pretty excited for that. Or 2028. Pretty excited for that. But anyway, to this year's Olympics, put some money down on that. The WNBA when it comes back, MLB, whatever it is, right? UFC. This is a special time in which FanDuel is offering a daily boost and bonus to all of their customers, existing and new. So it doesn't matter if you've been here for 3 years or if you just picked it up and you're trying to put down your first bet. Go ahead and go to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com. Take advantage of the daily boost, no matter who you are, and make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this the first listen of your day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. North Carolina A&T and Hampton do not have high expectations in the CAA. And that's not coming from within. That's coming from the conference. They don't really expect much to change. And it's not as if Hampton and A&T were real players in that conference in 2023. That is projected, if you're looking at the CAA polls, to be the exact same response with some baby steps. It's some baby movement, very little. There was a little bit of conference shakeup in the CAA. They brought in Bryant from the Big South, where everybody comes from. Everybody comes from the Big South, right? They brought in Bryant from the Big South to give them a 16-team conference that will slowly or quickly, actually, next year be broken right back down. But as of right now, they have a 16-team conference. The reason I stress that is because it does slightly impact the preseason polls. This is A&T's projection. They're projected to go from 14th, which they were last year, second to last, to 14th. This year, third from last. Is that an improvement? I guess, and to a certain degree it is. But like I said, it's nothing different. The only team that is below A&T in the preseason polls is Bryant, the team that just got to the conference, and then also Stony Brook, the only team who didn't win a single game. North Carolina A&T won one game. It wasn't in conference, but they did win one game last year. Stony Brook won 0, none, zilch, nada. All right, and they're expected to be worse than A&T again. Hampton, they came in at 11th last year. They're predicted to be 12th. So there's a slight drop off on where they're expecting them. That doesn't have anything to do with Bryant. They've been 12th regardless. So this is the same thing. This is basically predicting a do-over. Hampton's interesting to me because Hampton had a really good start to the season last year. So much so that when they started losing CAA games, they were still in the top 5, top 7 in the HBCU rankings that we always do. I want to see if they can start fast again. Last year, they had Howard, Grambling, and Norfolk State. This year, they have Howard, Norfolk State. So they're running it back with those 2 former MEAC opponents. And then you also, the battle of the real HU. But then also you have Virginia Union, a D2 school. And then you also have Morgan State. So they're going against 3 MEAC opponents. I love when these non-HBCU conference HBCUs still face against SWAC and MEAC schools. It always kind of makes me laugh a little bit. Not because I'm laughing at them, just because I just wonder how much of the bragging rights are involved. Like Hampton, for example. Granted, they split against the MEAC last year. But let's say they had knocked off Howard and they had knocked off Norfolk State. Let's say they knock off Howard, Norfolk State, and Morgan State this year. If I was in Hampton shoes, I would like, see, if I was over there, I'm smacking y'all up. That's just what it is. I'm done with y'all. Like, I'm over here. So it's almost like bragging rights of, if I was over there, what I would do to you. Maybe that's just me. But I'll be interested to see if they have one more out of conference game than they did last year. They'll start off their season this way. I'll be interested to watch them. They started off 3-1, including a victory in their CAA opener, but then they end up going 2-5 down the stretch. If they can start fast and continue that, then maybe we'll see them end in the top half. I'm not gonna say they were close last year, but it definitely felt like they shouldn't have combusted the way they did. So I'll be watching what they do this year. Karan Prunty from our top 10 list is the only HBCU player who was a part of the all CAA team. He was a all conference 3rd-team player last year. He's been a phenomenal player in the Big South. He was an honorable mention in the Big 12 when he played for Kansas. So I'm not really shocked to see him on this list. To me, this one made the most sense. This is what I expected. Karan Prunty is a fantastic cornerback. So it's no shock that he's on the preseason all-conference team, and I expect him to be on the all-conference team when it's all said and done before entering the draft. Speaking of the draft, on Wednesday, because we won't be back tomorrow, I'm going on vacation, and I'm trying to do 3 episodes so I can space it out. I didn't want to just give you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, fend for yourself. So I'm going to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because I'm not recording 5 episodes before I leave, and I want to enjoy my vacation as a vacation with relaxing. We'll be looking at draft stock versus team impact, because those are two different conversations. And we've been doing a lot of draft talk conversations, draft talk. But I want to make sure that we understand the value of draft talk and how it plays in how it plays into who you should, or how you should look into these players. I want to look at that with a little bit more detail on tomorrow's episode. And also, FAMU has been predicted to win the HBCU National Championship for a second year in a row by a different publication. Obviously not, because the SWAC doesn't even think they'll win the conference. Let's break that down on tomorrow. I'm so excited. In the meantime, between time, until next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.